Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here I bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the eve of November 28, 2023 in the United States, the morning of November 29, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the truce between the two sides and the hostage exchange. It is currently the fifth day of the truce, and the hostage exchange between the two sides went forth as planned. A total of 10 Israeli citizens and 2 Thai citizens were released from captivity in the Gaza Strip, and 30 Palestinian prisoners were released from Israeli jails. Regarding the Israeli hostages that were released, these involved 9 women and 1 17-year-old girl. No children or minors were released in the last 24 hours. The husbands and partners of many of the women who were released today remain in captivity. In terms of the 30 Palestinian prisoners who were released, 15 of them are women and 15 of them are boys who are minors under the age of 19. Arranging the release today, Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad staged a public event in which they transferred over the prisoners from their custody to the Red Cross. This was done in the town of Rafah. This is significant for 2 reasons. First of all, because in the first couple of days, Hamas was doing this very clandestinely, and now, as they probably have more faith that they can do this out in the open, they are staging these public events in which a crowd is roaring and cheering as they transfer over the prisoners to the Red Cross. It is also significant, however, because this is the first time the Palestinian Islamic Jihad openly participated in transferring over its own prisoners to the Red Cross, and there was a display of unity between the sides as Hamas fighters and Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighters hugged each other. This is quite significant because in the last couple of days it was reported that Palestinian Islamic Jihad has agreed to hand over their prisoners to Hamas, has agreed that Hamas is going to negotiate for them, and now they also had a public display of unity, likely in order to solidify this. In the last hours, Hamas has transferred over to Israel the list of 10 hostages that are going to be released tomorrow, and Israel is currently reviewing that list. Thus far, 61 Israelis, 19 Thai citizens, and 1 Filipino citizen have been released in the hostage exchanges. This leaves roughly 154 to 155 hostages that remain. The number is not 100% clear. That is because the Thai government is saying there might be a few more of their citizens that remain in captivity. Also, Israel is still identifying the dead bodies from October 7th. The body of someone who was considered kidnapped was identified as dead only in the last 24 hours, so the number is not 100% clear. Regarding additional details that are coming out from the freed hostages, contradicting previous reports in which most of the hostages stated that they were held together in the units in which they were captured, either if this was in the according to the different kibbutzim or towns or families, some of the hostages who were released in the last 2 days are stating that they were separated from their families. They didn't know actually what was happening to one another. In addition, another report that came out is that 3 Israeli soldiers that had been missing since October 7th are now confirmed dead, and their bodies have been kidnapped by Hamas and are held by Hamas. Regarding future developments of the truce and possibly extending it, there were a lot of reports today about negotiations and expanding the truce either for another 2 days and possibly further expansions. The Arab al-Jadid reported earlier in the day that Egyptian sources stated that there are initial agreements between the sides for an additional 2-day extension in addition to the 2 days we're currently in, and that Hamas has stated that it is contact with other organizations in the Gaza Strip who are holding women and children. The reports of the agreement of 2-day extension were reported and echoed elsewhere, however no official statement has come out about this. This is quite important because in the initial agreement, the truce can be extended up to 10 days according to the criteria. So if Hamas releases every day 10 women and or children, then it can buy themselves another day of truce up to 10 days. Right now the truce was initially for 4 days. Now it has been extended by 2 more days. It's supposed to expire tomorrow is going to be the last day. However, the reports are that it can be extended possibly by 2 more days. Relating to this, today there was very high-profile negotiations going on in Qatar between the head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea, the head of the CIA, William Barnes, Egyptian Intelligence Minister Abbas Kamel, and the Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Al-Thani. According to different reports, the focus was on extending the current truce, but more broadly on starting to arrange negotiations for the next rounds of hostage exchanges and possibly ceasefires. According to reports, they deliberated what are going to be the terms for releasing more elderly men, fathers of children who were released, young people under the age of 24 that were kidnapped from the Re'im party, and critically, possibly female IDF soldiers. 5 female IDF soldiers were kidnapped amongst the scores of IDF soldiers that are held in captivity, as well as possibly releasing the kidnapped bodies that I mentioned earlier. The presence of Egyptian Minister of Intelligence Abbas Kamel is very important. This is the first time that he is physically present in the negotiations instead of just being present from afar. His presence is very important because he himself has very good ties both with Israel and with Hamas. He was a pivotal figure in negotiating previous ceasefires and negotiations between the sides, so his presence there likely indicates that they are actually on the verge of some sort of breakthrough. There are varying reports in Israel regarding how to treat what is happening in these negotiations. Some top officials stated that Israel aspires to release as many hostages as possible only during the first 10-day truce. However, that if a serious offer comes for larger extensions of the truce and mass release of hostages, then it will be debated on in the government. Others stated that it is unlikely that additional groups of people, i.e. those who extend beyond the criteria of women and children, will be released within these 10 days, but that they may be part of a new deal. Israel, according to later reports, stated to negotiators that it is not going to discuss any new deals until all women and children are released. There are currently 9 children and minors under the age of 19 that still remain in captivity. And similarly, Qatar foreign minister also stated that any negotiations regarding any soldiers will only be discussed after all the citizens, not just women and children, all citizens have been released as well. Relating to this deal, the Wall Street Journal today quoted Egyptian sources stating that if a long-term ceasefire is negotiated between the sides, both are going to have to come to severe compromises. According to the source, in order to release IDF soldiers, Israel is going to have to release thousands of Palestinian prisoners and halt or stop the offensive in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas may have to agree to demilitarize. Responding to these reports, Minister Gantz, who's a member of the War Cabinet, and other Israeli officials stated they are committed to the war continuing after the pause. They are not going to accept a ceasefire and a stopping of any Israeli offensive. The Jewish Power Party, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir, stated it would leave the government if Israel stops the war. Minister of Finance Smotrich, leader of the Zionism Party, also tweeted that stopping the war is not on the table, not even an option. It will not even be debated in the government, and he said that that is part of a plan to destroy Israel. So right now what we have from this is that there's ongoing negotiations. It is likely, according to varying reports, that the truce will be extended by 2 more days, which will secure the release of at least 20 more Israeli hostages, and in turn the release of at least 60 more Palestinian prisoners, and the continuing influx of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. However, the negotiations extending beyond that, right now, a lot of conflicting reports. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, today was the first major violation of the truce. So the first violation occurred 15 minutes into the truce when a rocket was fired. Since then, there have been days of absolute calm. Today was the first serious violation. In 2 different incidences, 3 explosive devices were detonated near IDF soldiers in the north of the Gaza Strip, and there was a report that even a gun battle ensued in one of those incidents. Several IDF soldiers are reported to be lightly injured. Al-Arabi al-Jadid reported that it was Ezzadin al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas, that detonated the explosives, and shortly after the incidents, Al-Qassam spokesperson Abu Ubaida also stated that there were field altercations that occurred today due to IDF violations up north. Responding to this, the IDF emphasized that the soldiers were on the ceasefire lines and had not violated any of the ceasefire agreements. Right now, those incidents seem to be contained. Israel has not responded amidst a lot of political criticism that occurred inside Israel. Right now, it appears the truce is still being held, but this is the first major violation. In addition, regarding the future fighting in the Gaza Strip, there's mounting pressure on Israel to avoid mass Palestinian displacement in southern Gaza. So Israel has been stating, specifically Yoav Gallant, also Prime Minister Netanyahu and others, have been stating that Israel is going to expand its campaign to southern Gaza, where right now upwards of 1.8 million Palestinians have fled from the north of the Gaza Strip, in addition to the Palestinians that usually reside in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and there's growing concern about another major displacement of Palestinians. The U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby today stated that the U.S. supports extending the truce in order to secure the release of as many hostages as possible, but relating to the southern parts of Gaza Strip, he added that Israel now has the burden of the displaced from the northern part of the Gaza Strip, that they are currently taking refuge in the south, and that planning any military operations in the south must take into account the extra innocent people that are there. Reports in Reuters went even further about U.S. pressure. They stated that there's massive diplomatic pressure, including from President Biden himself, that has sent messages to Israel saying that the U.S. will not accept another mass uprooting of Palestinians from the south like what occurred in the north. According to reports, in a conference call, President Biden explicitly stated to Israel, presumably to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'm quoting, "You cannot have the sort of scale of displacement that took place in the north replicated again in the south. It will be beyond disruptive. It will be beyond the capacity of any humanitarian support network." The humanitarian support network that has been established in the south is something the United States is emphasizing again and again in its talks with Israel, stating that any massive displacement is going to again create an even worse humanitarian catastrophe in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. In addition, there are also reports that the U.S. administration is stating that Israel must draw lessons from what happened in the war up north and not engage down south before it considers how civilians will be protected. In addition, today there are the first reports coming in regarding the increasing death count that is mounting in the Gaza Strip. after they are uncovering more and more dead bodies from the rubble. The Gazan health minister today reported that the body count now is over 16,000 Palestinians that have been killed since the war began, and that 6,000 are still considered missing, with upwards of 35,000 considered wounded. The information ministry reported that currently the number is upwards of 15,000 Palestinians that have been killed since the war began. Moving on to the humanitarian situation, today there was a full complement of humanitarian aid trucks that entered according to the deals of the truce. After yesterday was not reported how many trucks entered, today it was reported. These include 200 aid trucks carrying food, water, and extensive medical supplies, as well as 4 fuel trucks that entered the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and 4 trucks of cooking gas that also entered. In addition, the UN humanitarian coordinator, Martin Griffith, is due to arrive in Jordan tomorrow in order to begin negotiations about reopening the Kerem Shalom crossing. The Kerem Shalom crossing is one of the crossings between Israel and the Gaza Strip. Prior to the war, upwards of 60% of all humanitarian aid crossed through the Kerem Shalom crossing. Since the war broke out, all crossings between Israel and the Gaza Strip are closed, and all aid comes through the Rafah crossing. This often leads to delays, so now the UN is trying to get involved to reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing. In addition, there were also reports today of Gazans that continue to move southward during the truce through the humanitarian corridors, and this is something that the IDF continues to call on Gazans to do, because as the war again is started up, whether in the north or in the south, the IDF is still calling on Gazans to move down south. Today there were pictures of thousands of Gazans that are still moving down south through the humanitarian corridors. Moving on to the West Bank, the Palestinian Prisoners Club today reported that upwards of 3,290 Palestinians have been arrested in the West Bank since October 7th. This is substantially larger than the IDF numbers that are reporting 2,000 Palestinians that have been arrested, of them upwards of 1,200 belonging to Hamas. In addition today, Jibril Rajoub, who is the secretary of the Central Fatah Committee, which is the main party within the PLO, stated in an interview to Egyptian media that, and I quote, "What happened on October 7th is part of a defensive Palestinian war, and the next explosion will be in the West Bank." He explicitly cited the Israeli occupation as what is going to bring about this explosion. Regarding actual confrontations in the West Bank today, there was Palestinian sources reported that 1 Palestinian was killed in confrontations in the Baitunia area, and that another different reports stated was badly injured. Other reports say died. So up between 1 to 2 Palestinians are reported to have been killed in confrontations with the IDF in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the north, there were again no incidents reported of violence between the two sides. There was one report in the Lebanese state media that an Israeli shell was fired towards a town in southern Lebanon. However, this was not echoed neither by Israel, nor by Hezbollah, nor by anyone else, so it is unclear what that report is. Other than that, this was again a day of no confrontations in the north. Hezbollah parliamentarian Hassan Fadlallah today stated that he hopes that the ceasefire continues so that Hezbollah can use the time to, I'm quoting, compensate the civilians of the south who suffered losses from Israeli attacks. Which is an interesting statement, given that Hezbollah has constantly maintained that they are not a part of the ceasefire, they're not a part of the truce, they are only going to adhere to it because they support the Gaza Strip. This is the first time that any member of Hezbollah said they actually hope that the ceasefire is extended. Moving to some of the regional developments, there was reports today that Israeli ships are beginning to reroute their trajectories and bypass the Red Sea in order to avoid Houthi areas. This is causing substantial confusion and delays in Israeli maritime. So far, there have been 3 different attacks, either of the Houthis or by other actors, and then encouraged by the Houthis, against either ships that were Israeli or that were partly owned by Israelis. At this point, there has been no major attack against a specifically Israeli ship. However, any ship that is somewhat affiliated with Israel is apparently starting to reroute and to avoid these areas. Moving on to some of the political and general trends that developed in the last 24 hours, the foreign ministers of the G7 today stated that they support extending the truce between Israel and Hamas, during which time humanitarian aid to Gaza will increase and an immediate unconditional release of hostages will be facilitated. They also emphasized Israel's right to defend itself, while clarifying, I'm quoting, "Uninvolved civilians must be protected and international law must be obeyed," specifically calling on ensuring that Gaza civilians receive food, water, fuel, and medical supplies. In addition, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister in Israel, today again stated that the aim is to allow Israeli civilians to return to their homes within a 4 to 7 kilometer radius of the Gaza Strip by January, which tells us something about the prospects of the way Israel thinks the war is going to happen. If by January there is hope that there will be enough IDF control on the ground that Israeli civilians will be able to return to some of their homes in the area surrounding the Gaza Strip within a 4 to 7 kilometer radius. In other news, in a rare move, the Chinese foreign minister is traveling to New York, where he's going to personally lead the UN Security Council debate about the war that is supposed to happen tomorrow. So China is the current president of the UN Security Council. Usually this is done by simply the UN ambassadors. The foreign minister has in the past taken very, very critical stances against Israel. He is now traveling traveling to the UN and he's going to personally lead the debate tomorrow. In other news, the Thai foreign minister today visited Israel. He visited 15 Thai citizens that had been released thus far, and this is before the other Thai citizens were released today. Likely he met with them as well. In addition, responding to Elon Musk's visit to Israel in the last days, Osama Hamdan, who's one of Hamas's leaders in Lebanon, issued an invitation to Elon Musk to visit the Gaza Strip in order to witness the devastation that has occurred there. Moving on to speculation regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, the Wall Street Journal today reported from an Egyptian source, which stated that both Israel and the United States know that destroying Hamas is an unrealistic idea, but that he is glad that more actors are starting to think about how to secure a future of peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. So this again likely relates to the report of the last several days that Egypt is starting to think about what sort of regional force may be able to take control of the Gaza Strip in order to ensure security for Israel, but also that Israel does not dominate the Gaza Strip militarily. Likely it is referring to that. In addition, in an interview to a German media outlet today, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that after Israel defeats Hamas, and I'm quoting, Gaza must be demilitarized, and then the population de-radicalized, which is what was done in Germany. It may be impossible to defeat Nazism. There are still neo-Nazis, but the Nazi regime was destroyed. There was denazification, and the culture changed. He stated that this can be achieved by, and again I'm quoting, complete military victory and cultural change, by education and learning from past mistakes. When he was asked who will govern the Gaza Strip, he stated that Israel must ensure that the Strip is not a threat as it was before the war, and thus, and again final quote, we will continue to hold main military responsibility since we don't see anyone else who can do it. Someone has to fight the terrorists who want to carry on after Hamas. So again, what we get from Netanyahu's statement is that Israel, as far as Netanyahu is concerned, is planning to hold on at least to overarching military control, but there is still no answer given to who is actually going to govern the Gaza Strip, what is going to be the future of the Gaza Strip, and where this is going to lead. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.